and welcome to our panel today about gray areas and controversially discussed topics around EUDR. We really don't have much time, and I want to get out as much as possible of the content, and which is why we'll only give a very short introduction of our panelists, and then we jump right in. And also we will have reserve at least 10 minutes of this 30 minutes for Q&A. So again, on the right hand, on your right hand side on your screen, there's a little Q&A icon, 2 speech bubbles with a Q and an A. You can press there and submit questions, and I see somebody already did. Perfect. So our panelists today, thank you so much for joining us. All of them, I know each of them, they're all experts on EUDR, and I start with welcoming Constanze Schweidmann from the global law firm CMS. She focuses on public law and ESG compliance. Thanks for joining us today, Constanze.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
Then I go on to Rob Shaw, who is the head of standards and integrity at PEFC International, which is the world's leading forest certification system, promoting sustainable forest management through independent certification. Hi, Rob.
Morning.
And last but not least, Maurits Brugink, who is the director of RidensPA, an EU public affairs and business consultancy in Brussels, so very close to the institutions. And RidensPA represents, among others, the Malaysian Timber Council in Brussels. Thanks for joining us, Maurits.
Good morning.
All right, and like I said, we jump right in, and we also jump right at the elephant in the room. So because many people are always asking, is it coming? Is it not coming? There has been postponement. There has been the European People's Party's move to ask for a no-risk category in the European Parliament, and lots of discussion, everybody knows. So what I want to ask my panelists now is, each of you, I start with Constanze, just give me a percentage value. There will be a postponement or major changes to the regulation. What is the probability from your point of view?
Well, it's difficult to predict, but I would go with 30%.
30%, Rob?
I'll be slightly more optimistic or pessimistic, and I'll go 25%.
25%, perfect. And Maurits?
Same here, 25% chance of delay.
I would be somewhere around there also, so that it should also be roughly our average at like whatever, 18. So, but Maurits, let me ask you first, do you think that matters, this number?
Well, it's good already that there are odds. So I get asked this question as well, and it's very much asked in the sense of yes or no. So you can never exclude it. So it's good that you already have this odds approach. But we all have to prepare for 30 December 2025, really. So that's why we're here. So the odds are that it may be delayed are low. So don't count on it.
No, correct. Constanze, what do you say?
Yeah, I totally agree with Maurits. I think it would be burdensome to not prepare for 30th of December 2025 for sure. The signs currently look like it's gonna apply from that point in time. So companies are well advised to start if they haven't already started. And what I really feel at the moment is that companies just want the clarity. It's not the problem that they don't want to comply with this regulation, but the problem is that there are still uncertainties from the EU especially, and this is really what we want to avoid. We just want the clarity for everyone who has to apply the EUDR.
Yeah, there has been a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion. Maurits, your firm represents the Malaysian Timber Council, as we already said, and Malaysia has been very vocal in its criticism of the EUDR, particularly its standard risk classification. So from your perspective in Brussels, how are these complaints being heard, and how is it handled, and how do you perceive the communication by the Commission to the outside world?
Sure. First, I want to make clear that my comments today are not on behalf of the Malaysian Timber Council. So they're on my own account. No, I think that the EUDR is a law that is in itself invites complexity. So it's a very complex approach of dealing with the matter, and that doesn't change. So although I think it's fair to say that the European Commission has welcomed delegations from the timber sector at least, and taken things into account. We know there are the fact sheets, there are the guidance documents. You can see that some of the comments have been taken into account, but the base text, the EUDR itself, has not changed. So the outset is just complex, and I'm afraid that when we move into real mode next year, we will discover how complex it is, because I think there will be a great risk of non-compliance not by wanting to be non-compliant, but basically there's so many open questions still left that it's a trial and error period, I'm afraid, that is ahead of us.
Yes, yeah, it will definitely be interesting. So we have 4 months to go. The implementation has already been delayed a year. Some critics say this will cost hundreds of thousands of hectares of forest. Rob, I want to ask you, was this delay a necessary act of pragmatism to ensure that the law is workable, or was it a failure of political will that undermines the EU's climate credibility?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, just briefly, the high-level intent of EUDR is to prevent deforestation and stop forest degradation. From my perspective, it's good to remind everyone that agriculture is by far the biggest driver of deforestation and degradation, and it accounts for 80 to 90% of global deforestation that's happening right now. PEFC deals primarily with timber and forest-based products and in the rubber sector. And so from our perspective, from the forest managers and forest owners' point of view, anyone managing their forest responsibly at the beginning of the supply chain shouldn't be concerned. But timber supply chains in particular are extremely complex and global. And therefore, bad actors who are engaging in deforestation will be trying to place timber into these supply chains. And so the EU is grappling with probably the biggest database that's been built in the world. So I can understand the delay from a technical point of view. As we've all been mentioning earlier, the political maneuverings and the uncertainty doesn't play out well in other countries in the world, especially the forestry producing countries. So there is a huge amount of communication and dialogue required here to even get this thing started. So I would say that the delay was necessary, and as we've seen, we're still not really at the start line here, all ready to go. So there's still some way to go here in terms of common understanding.
Right. But how do you feel this was perceived in production countries, so outside of the EU?
That very much depends on the type of forestry and the eco-region that you're in. So, tropical complex forests in the economic south, which provide huge amounts of timber into the European Union, they're very worried about some of the definitions. Forest degradation as a definition, for example, is very difficult to deal with in practice. And often people see this as just a barrier to trade, or a do as I say, not as I do issue. And EU countries pushing for zero risk for themselves while maintaining non-zero risk for other countries becomes highly political.
Yeah. So Rob just mentioned the issue with the definition of, or the workability of forest degradation, and I think that's also a very ambiguous topic for many. So forest degradation, Constanze, what does it mean, and how can a company deal with this definition practically?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question, because we feel like this is coming from clients more and more often. So especially if there is a risk of deforestation or forest degradation, then especially regarding forest degradation, this does not automatically mean that the plots or geolocation is non-compliant if there's only a risk. But then it's really important to understand if this forest degradation is really true, or if it can be undermined by several documents and procedures. So forest degradation means the conversion of primary forest to naturally regenerating forest into plantation forest, or primary forest into planted forest under the EUDR. And this is, yeah, if you read it for the first time, it's a bit difficult to understand. But as I said before, we have to check whether the forest degradation constitutes a relevant risk of forest degradation within the meaning of the EUDR. And there are documents which also the FAQ mention could lead to the result that there is actually no forest degradation under the EUDR. And this is, for example, true if there are forest management plans which set out specific harvesting methods or natural regeneration, because just because trees were harvested, it doesn't mean that there's a forest degradation. So if there are, for example, legal harvest permits in the relevant country where the wood was harvested, or for example, there's indications or documents relating to damaged or weakened trees which had to be harvested in order to make sure that the quality of the forest itself remains. And for example, there can also be harvesting carried out to prevent the risk of forest fires, for example. So we really see that there is that documents exist. For example, I've just seen it yesterday for Canada, where clients were able to provide information that there are specific harvesting methods, and in that case, we really have to check carefully if this really leads to forest degradation, or if the documents tell us that there's actually a system behind it which goes along with the EUDR.
So in a way, it's forward-looking. It's not like I remove a tree here, so it's degradation, but by removing the tree, will I degrade the forest?
Yeah.
And this you can support that it doesn't with forestry, forest management plans and so forth. And Rob, would you say certification can help there?
Yes, certification can certainly help. I mean, I've traveled and audited recently in both Malaysia and Indonesia, and we operate in 48 countries where we have national sustainable forest management systems. So at the moment, we have aligned our international benchmark standard with the EUDR, and each country is now going through the process of bringing those changes into their national schemes. The definitions of forest are different around the world. The EU have landed on one definition of types of forest. It doesn't always line up, but the good thing about certification is that there will be a management plan for each forest, and there will be reforestation techniques which are built into the national jurisdictions. And this is being audited and checked on an annual basis by third-party auditors. So in Malaysia and Indonesia, for example, where you are harvesting individual trees in the forest, and in many cases leaving a barcoded tag on the stump and putting a barcoded tag on the log, then that's giving you an origin back to a specific geographical point. But then the restoration of that forest, either by replanting or natural regeneration, is making sure the biodiversity of that forest is maintained. So I would say degradation is probably the most difficult topic in terms of policing this going forwards. And in other parts of the globe, in boreal forests and in other countries where desertification is an issue, the picture on the ground, as Moritz was saying, in terms of moving forwards with this legislation, is much more complex than than can be captured in a few simple definitions. So, but third-party auditing and voluntary certification is definitely a tool that helps.
Since I said we would reserve 15 to 10 minutes, we should start with the questions now. And the first one I'm from the audience, the first one I'm going to direct at you, Maurits. So it's due to all these uncertainties and complexities. Do you expect that there may be any periods of leniency or phase-in? Is that something to count on?
I think so. So I would also call for a grace period where the traders will have time to correct if there are any mistakes or shortcomings, correct their shortcomings. And we've already talked with some authorities that indicated they would give a grace period. In other words, they would check, and if they would find, let's say, an incompliance on one or other specific issue, that they would give a provisional fine, and that they would come back after 12 months, then check after 12 months whether this issue, this approach has been addressed. And if it is addressed, the fine would not be executed. And I think that should be a European standard, because I'm sure that as of the 1st of January, there will be a lot of things that are not clear and that come to the surface by just doing it. We've seen also in the Netherlands, they have done in the last, just before the summer, these test runs as well. And the test runs basically, as far as our knowledge concerns, basically showed a large incompliance. They don't communicate it in the official websites and so on, but
it did actually yesterday. No, the day before yesterday. I'm just looking for it. But
so the background seems to be that there is a large incompliance. That's also the reason why they didn't publish it. They said they would publish it already before the summer, but and I think the authorities, they have the same issue as the traders, is that for them as well, there are a lot of new things that come up to the surface and they have to deal with it. So I think it's very important to keep good relationships with the competent authorities where you are exporting to, or in the case of EU, where you're importing, and to do at least a big effort in due diligence yourself. So if you show goodwill, then I think, well, it's to say to get away with it is a bit negative, but you will then get a grace period. And I think we should call for the EU also to introduce that if there's not a delay, then at least have a year where you can test things out.
But also worth noting that these companies who attended in these trial inspections in the Netherlands, those were all they volunteered basically, and they all felt very well prepared. So I think that's like
they failed.
The start. And they failed, yeah, but they didn't start at nothing basically. So they started at we thought we got it right, we didn't get it right, so that was the starting point. I think that's important. Thank you. And then I wanted to ask this question anyway because I think it interests many, and now coincidentally it's in several questions that I saw coming from the Q&A. Just the topic of recycled products in general. So Constanze, I'm going to ask you first, are recycled products in scope of EUDR, yes or no, before we dig into the details?
Yeah, so if the life cycle of the recycled product really ended, then the products are not part of the EUDR anymore. But it's really important to distinguish there, because there are sometimes products that are that contain parts of products that really haven't finished their life cycle yet. So it's always important to look at the whole product and look at the different components of the product. So that is important, and that's what the FAQ also tell us.
Yeah, and there's one question relating to this, which is what kind of proof do we need to provide for 100% recycled paper products since they are exempt? I don't know if anyone can or knows the answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to
Maybe,
pick up
right?
on this.
Okay,
so recycled around the world is a very complex topic. in many developed countries, recycled has a specific legal definition, and waste materials which then come back into manufacturing will be accompanied by a waste transfer note or a waste undertakers note. Voluntary certifications such as FSC and PEFC have standards which deal with this, and so evidence such as photography and documentary paperwork will prove that material being claimed as recycled is actually recycled. There's a danger here, obviously, because if you read the FAQs, and I would encourage everybody to go and read the FAQs, quite a lot of the questions in the chat here are answered by the FAQs. That's very straightforward. It's saying if you have virgin fiber content in a composite material, you have to follow EUDR, and if it's recycled, then it's exempt. Well, that's a massive encouragement for any bad actors to just start claiming that everything's recycled. And the timber trade and the paper trade is global. So as Moritz was saying, the actual when the rubber hits the road in January, we're going to see a lot of questions being posed by monitoring and compliance. Fortunately, in the timber industry, EUTR preceded EUDR. So this is more evolution than revolution. I think in the other risk commodities, those sectors are having a much bigger gap to jump. So I'm hoping that the responsible timber trade around the world will be taking this seriously. But there are some serious sampling and testing issues going to be needed, and lots of training for the monitoring staff to understand how to drill down into these composite products.
Okay. Then let's move on to a question, the top question at the moment with 15 votes. And this has been answered by the Commission quite clearly, but I'm still going to repeat the question. What happens if suppliers are not able / willing to provide EUDR relevant information for the DDS? Does the EU expect the company to end business relationships? Moritz, do you want to take this one?
If I understand the question correct, I couldn't really hear it, but no,
sorry.
if you have shortcomings in
The question is, if my suppliers don't give me the data, basically, for example, the geolocation data, what do I do?
Well, the responsibility, of course, is with the importer. So the European. So he or she has to make it in order. I would like this is a good moment to point also at the development of the timber checker, which is a platform now developed by the German forest industry or timber industry, where you can actually, as an exporter to the EU, input your data. So that's one of the shortcomings of the system, is that the traces system is a system for the importer, and the importer has to fill in all this data and so on. In a new case, and it's currently being tested, but it will be there operational well before the 1st of January 2026. It will allow the exporters to the EU to provide their data, so there will be a better control mechanism for the European importer. But in that case, no, an importer would be advised not to go ahead if there are substantial shortcomings. You cannot go ahead. That's clear, unless you take the risk and not being controlled. But that would not be my advice. So you would have to comply for 100% with all the requirements. If you get caught and there are still shortcomings, but your system that you have in your company in Europe is robust, then you will be given a grace. That's my assessment. So that the auditors, the competent authorities, will look at how you deal with it. If it is a robust verification system within the company, even if you have shortcomings, then you would get away.
And I think the answer that the Commission is also in one of the FAQs is always, what do I do if my suppliers don't give me the data? And then in the FAQ, the answer by the Commission is usually, you need the data to import. Full stop. And that's pretty much it. Thank you. Constanze, one question about the, I guess, applicability. So Is a due diligence statement needed for import/export between EU countries? And what about the UK and Switzerland?
Yeah, so we always have to take a look at if the company we are talking about is the operator or the trader. But in general, there's the applicability also relates to trade within the EU. So there's, for example, if a product is produced in the EU and then forwarded to a trader, for example, then the company producing that, whatever chair, for example, wooden chair, is of course falls under the EUDR. So there's the applicability within the EU as well, of course. And regarding Switzerland and what was the
UK.
UK? Yeah, well, then that wouldn't count as the EU, but still the applicability is on, of course. And then we also have to, regarding Switzerland and UK, for example, but many other countries, you know, the benchmarking, we then have to take a look at what kind of requirements the EUDR requires for the specific country. So if there's, for example, the simplified due diligence, but in general, there's the applicability of the EUDR. Yeah.
Perfect. It's already 58 and I want to end one session on time today. So it has to be this, unfortunately. But I think this was very insightful. I know there's several tons of more questions, which we will try to answer in a follow-up. But now I want to say thank you to the panelists today. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your insights. And also thanks for everybody who tuned in. Next up here, we will have the session with Ms. Mendesauer from the German Competent National Authority. She will tell you what an EUDR audit is likely to look like with them. And yeah, you can just stay in the room or go to the other track where we'll have a walkthrough of a full compliance walkthrough for the manufacturing sector in LiveEO's EUDR solution TradeAware. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.